Dan Pucci on the saxophone. Tom Williams on the bass. Thank you very much. I've got my official musical instrument museum hat here. I just wanted to show off the local swag. You always want to do that. And here I have in my hands the book, The Reason We're Here. Ben Sidran, There Was a Fire, Jews, Music, and the American Dream. This is something new for me. Some of you recall my career as a nightclub entertainer, playing jazz and writing bebop tunes and stuff. But I wrote this book, and I decided that I liked, rather than doing book readings, to come out, talk to people, play some music, and that's the way I was going to present the book. Now, the book is a history of the Jews in the 20th century in America and their contributions to American popular music. And it was triggered by the awareness at one point that a group that never made up more than 2% of the population of the United States contributed over 80% of the popular music. Now, the 2% is a real number. The 80 I made up. I mean, there's no way to know. But it felt right to me. Now, the first song we played was a George Gershwin song, I've Got Rhythm. And the interesting thing about it is we started out just playing as jazz musicians will, and we finished with Gershwin's I've Got Rhythm. And it was a way to bring the subject into the open, the fact that one of the things the Jews have contributed is the framework for what we call the Great American Songbook. And those are all the classic songs from people like Irving Berlin, George Gershwin, Harold Arlen, Jerome Kern. And these songs have been the basis for jazz musicians, for popular musicians, for 100 years. And as you can see, it's fun for us to play these songs. So there's something inherent about these songs that are just natural and comfortable for American musicians. There's something in it. And one of the things, of course, that's in it is the rhythm. A lot of fun to play. But the other thing that's in it is a kind of narrative. And I just wanted to throw this word out there because it's going to be something that, whether I talk about it or not, you're going to find in these songs that we're going to do tonight for you. The idea of telling a story. And that's what these Jewish composers were all about. They came from the Pale of Settlement in the 1880s. They were thrown out of this part of Russia by the pogroms. And between 1881 and 1920, more than 2 million Jewish refugees arrived on the shores of New York City. Matter of fact, the Lower East Side became the largest single pocket of poverty in the entire world. And they brought with them nothing but the clothes on their backs and the ideas in their heads, and they couldn't go home. They couldn't go back. And so they really came to the United States at a time that was actually an opportune time in the creation of American popular culture, such as music. But not just music. Here's an example. You know the Jews are thought of as being in the rag trade. The rag trade is the clothing business, right? Well, but why did they call it the rag trade? I'll tell you, because back in the Pale of Settlement, they weren't allowed to own land, vote, they weren't citizens, and they couldn't sell clothing, new clothing. But what they could do is collect rags and stitch them up into secondhand clothing. And when they came to the United States, they did the same thing. But, aha! Coincidentally, just when they arrived, the sewing machine was invented. And so you see these pictures of people on the Lower East Side schlepping their sewing machines with them. And within 5 years, these people had invented exact size clothing. Up until then, if you wanted to look nice, you had to be rich and have a tailor. Otherwise, you didn't look particularly nice. These people democratized fashion in America. And this is another thing that I think is important to say, that the core of the Jewish narrative is this idea of social justice and equality. I mean, here they come to America and everybody can look good. They're one with the common man. And you know, these people, they spoke Yiddish, which was a combination of German and Hebrew. And they landed on our shores. And you know, within 15 years of landing on these shores, Irving Berlin, who only spoke Yiddish, wrote his great hit, Alexander's Ragtime Band. Within 15 years, it's incredible. I've been trying to learn Spanish for 20, and I can barely order dinner. And he wrote all these great songs, Blue Skies, right? It's amazing, really. And at the time in New York, there was a newspaper, there still is actually, it's called The Forward, the Jewish Forward. Paper of record, the Fovets, I heard that. And so to help these immigrants become Americanized, they ran a series of articles on this sport, the American sport of baseball. And one of these Jewish immigrants, who had never been to a baseball game, decided he'd write a song about baseball. And we're going to play it for you. And if you listen to it, what you're going to hear is something very interesting. We're going to play it a little different than you've normally heard it. But what you're going to hear is that this song really isn't about baseball at all. It's about finding a home. It's about finding a home. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. 'Cause I don't care if I never come back. It's root, root, root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. 'Cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. The old ball game. It's root, root, root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. 'Cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes and you are out at the old bar. the old ball game. Thank you very much. Sorry, I forgot I wanted to read this. So the Musical Instrument Museum, what an incredible place. I got lost upstairs. Incredible, for 3 hours. And it reminded me of something in the book, actually. So I get to read it to you. This is the reading part. And it's this, you know, the Jewish people in the popular music business weren't just songwriters. And in fact, they were very important as publishers. A lot of these people who made this exact size clothing happen, they soon became song publishers. Just like they became movie executives. You know, how the American film business got started is it started with the retail clothing stores in New York, mostly run by these Jewish people from the Pale of Settlement. And this Nickelodeon got invented, right? And they didn't have theaters, so they put the Nickelodeons in the front of the clothing stores because no legitimate business wanted anything to do with this. It was a pennies business. And of course, the Jews, they didn't mind a pennies business. And pretty soon, the Nickelodeons were doing so well, they got rid of the clothes, they put chairs in, and that's how the first theaters were born. It's true. And so then, they were doing so much business and doing so well, they needed more films. But at the time, Thomas Edison owned the patent on making films, and Edison wasn't about to cooperate with these Orientals. And keep in mind, at the turn of the 20th century, not just Orientals, but in the United States, just as the Irish had been before them, the Jews were not considered white. And this explains to some extent their remarkable symbiosis with African American culture over the years. So Edison wasn't cooperating, so a lot of them moved to Hollywood to start making their own films, and within 15 years, the top 10 studios in Hollywood were run by men who grew up within 100 miles of Warsaw, Poland. Dayenu, it's the truth. Okay, so, but what here, I digress. What I wanted to tell you was this, that they were not only involved in all these aspects, but also in the invention of various things, like the microphone. And one of the great things they invented, and drummers will appreciate this, that up until the 30s, a drum kit, you've always heard, you've heard the Dixieland guys play on these drums. They're very busy, a lot of rhythm going everywhere. But today, when you hear a drummer, you hear what we call a groove. It's a steady beat. That was not possible until somebody invented what we call the ride cymbal. And the cymbal is a stand, and it's there, and you hit it, and it rings. Well, up until 1920-something, a gentleman named Victor Burton, born Victor Cohn, who actually had played with John Philip Sousa, he came on the scene back when the drummer's top cymbal was suspended on a leather thong and mounted atop the bass drum. One could use it for the occasional splash, but not for keeping steady time. Burton devised a vertical rod on which the cymbal could fit and fixed it in a place with the nuts so that the drummer could swing a steady beat. How about that? In addition, in a burst of inspiration, he mounted two small cymbals together facing each other on a vertical rod and connected them with a spring device. Using a foot pedal, he could whack them together on afterbeats, creating this boom chick. The device he called a sock cymbal eventually developed into the modern hi-hat. Both the swinging top cymbal and the hi-hat have been front and center on virtually every popular recording in the past 70 years, from jazz to blues to pop to country. So there you have. I thought that would be interesting for the Musical Instrument Museum crowd. Now, there's so many topics to cover and so little time that I have to be careful not to get bogged down too much in my favorite composers, who are George Gershwin and Harold Arlen. But I do want to play a couple of things by them. we played I've Got Rhythm by Gershwin. There's a sophistication and a kind of urban skepticism in Gershwin's music that came, I suspect, because he loved going to Harlem and hanging out with the stride pianists, James P. Johnson and Willie the Lion Smith, who, by the way, Willie the Lion Smith, great black stride piano from Harlem, was a rabbi. It's in the book, that's all I'm going to say. He was Jewish, self-identified as Jewish. But there's a classic example of this kind of sophistication and skepticism in what Gershwin referred to as his great New York opera. He originally set out to write an opera based on a Yiddish play called The Dybbuk, which was very popular in Europe. And he wrote some of the songs for it, but then he couldn't get the rights to The Dybbuk. Can you imagine somebody else in America had the rights to this play about a golem? I mean, I wonder whatever happened to that person, you know? But anyway, Gershwin took some of the same songs and included them in the opera that he did write. And the opera was called Porgy and Bess. It ain't necessarily so. Ain't necessarily so. Stories you liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so. They say old Jonah, he lived in a whale. Jonah, he lived in a whale. He made his home in that fish's abdomen. They say Jonah, he lived in a whale. Old Moses was found in a stream. Moses was found in a stream. He floated on water till old Pharaoh's daughter, she found him, she said, in a stream. And Methuselah lived 900 years. They say Methuselah lived 900 years. But what good is living if no girl will give in to no guy who's 900 years? That ain't living, not that part. It ain't necessarily so. Ain't necessarily so. Stories you liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily. Yeah. Page 10. Thank you. Gershwin, well, we could do the next 3 hours on Gershwin, but we're going to move along. I mentioned that Harold Arlen, one of my favorite composers, he, I'll cue you when we go into the song we're going to do, because I'm going to do something else first. He really, well, his father was a cantor, for example. He came from Buffalo. He left school at 15. He was a brilliant piano player. His father once told him, when Harold played his father a Louis Armstrong record, his father leapt up from his chair, indignant. He said, "Who is this man?" And Harold said, "Well, that's Louis Armstrong." "Why?" "What he's playing? You stole it from me." And so, you know, there's a lot of conflation people recognize between the blues and Jewish music. And not just because of the minor. You know, the Jewish songs are minor. But they're not just minor. They're minor in context of the major. Very quickly, let me just give you a quick demonstration of what I'm saying. And so, here's a major scale for you. C major scale. Here's a minor scale for you. A minor, same scale. Same row of notes, the only difference is the bass note. In other words, the only difference between major and minor is context. Context, where you put it. And this goes to the heart of this idea of the Jews telling a narrative in their music. It's something the great composer Shostakovich referred to as smiling through the tears. The Jews could always take something tragic and contextualize it with some happy overtones that it's just part of life, you know? And this is what made American popular songs so rich, because up until the 20th century, popular music had nothing to do with the average person. It was about, well, you know, Gilbert and Sullivan. It was polishing the handles on the big front door, you know. It was about kings and queens and Navy commanders and stuff. Suddenly, in America, music was about ordinary people. It was about regular lives. And you know, this idea of spiritual music, liturgical music versus popular music, the interesting thing about the popular music that these guys wrote is that it had this spiritual quality to it. When you think about what liturgical or spiritual music is supposed to be, it's supposed to be about this caring for one another, right? This great idea that we're all in this together. I mean, that's the most spiritual thing, you know, treating others as you would have them treat you. But when you think about what a love song is, what an American popular love song is, it's about a boy and a girl, and they care for each other. So every American popular song, little love song, is just a little sliver of this greater spiritual quest to care for something bigger than yourself. I'm going to play back-to-back two Harold Arlen compositions. I'll do the first one solo, and then we'll come in, and I'm going to play Harold Arlen's first big hit, Forget Your Troubles, Come On, Get Happy. But I'm going to do it in a little different way, because I'm going to show you what I mean by this place where night meets day, happy meets sad. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. Chase all your cares away. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord, He's waiting to take your hand. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're headed for the promised land. Now we're headed across that river. Cast your sins away in the tide, 'cause it's oh so peaceful on the other side. Forget your troubles. Forget your troubles. Forget your troubles. Come on, get happy. We're headed for the judgment day. Now we're headed across that river. Cast your sins away in the tide, 'cause it's oh so peaceful over on the other side. Forget your troubles. Come on, get happy. Chase all your cares away. Sing hallelujah, come on. Come on, get happy. We're headed for that judgment day. Thank you. A couple of Harold Arlen classics there. Great stories about the writing of Over the Rainbow. Don't have time to tell them to you, but I'm just pointing out. See, it's devious, I know, but that's part of the beauty of doing it this way. I mean, really, not only are these popular songs beautiful little narratives in themselves, but the overall arching narrative of the Jewish experience in American popular music is fascinating. It's full of so many characters, really, it's the only way to put them, and unusual situations. I mean, can you imagine, you know, today when, well, today, forget it, I don't know what teenagers are screaming about now, but, you know, they used to scream about the Beatles, say, right? And the girls would faint, they'd pass out. And the same thing with the Rolling Stones. I'm just reading a book by one of the Rolling Stones, and he talks about they were passing out, the girls were passing out by the hundreds, and before that it was Elvis Presley. I mean, the girls were screaming, they were carrying him out of the Ed Sullivan Theater. Before that it was Frank Sinatra. You know, this is all okay. But Benny Goodman, you got this bar mitzvah bocher with his glasses and a clarinet, and this was the first time in the 30s that you found this panic among young girls for a musician in America. Benny Goodman. Why Benny Goodman? Well, it was this swing. What I told you about when the cymbal got moved to the top and the drummer could swing. That's straight 4/4, bang, 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 bang. It's common time, it's called 4/4. Before that, there was 2/4, which is a little more measured. Before that, there was the waltz, which was considered risque. Can you imagine the Vietnamese waltz? The Viennese waltz. I'm telling you, it's the exhibit upstairs. It's completely blown my mind. It's all one big world music to me now. But the waltz was considered risque at one point, and yet, you know, people barely touched. But when swing came along and people started doing dances, well, even before swing, like the bunny hug and the grizzly bear and the turkey trot, these were risque dances. People were touching. They were touching not just their hands, they were, you know, So one of the things that happened is that in Chicago, the authorities were so outraged that these teenagers were doing these obscene, licentious dances that they mandated that no songs played in public could be under 120 beats a minute, because they thought that if you kept the tempos fast, the kids wouldn't get together. Well, you know what happened. This is Benny Goodman's Flying Home. One, two. Thank you. Okay, I promised you characters. Here's a character. Stand the map's on, ready? His name was Billy Hill. Nice Jewish boy from Boston. Fell in love with cowboys. Traveled the West. Wrote a lot of interesting songs. The Last Roundup, Wagon Wheels, An Old Cowhand from the Gowanus Canal. But he wrote this song, which I love and so many other people love. And it wouldn't have been possible if this Jewish boy from Boston had not gone west and then come back east to try to make it as a songwriter. You got to give a little, you got to take a little. Let your poor heart break a little. That's the story of yes, and that's the glory of love. You're gonna laugh a little, you're gonna cry a little. Let the clouds roll on by just a little. That's the story of yes, and that's the glory of love. As long as there are the two of us, I know we got the strength to carry on. 'Cause when this old world is through with us, we've got each other, we've got each other's arms. You wanna win a little, you're gonna lose a little. Might have to sing the blues a little. Well, that's the story of yes, and that's the glory of love. That's the story of love. Now, as long as there are the two of us, I know we got the strength to carry on. 'Cause when this old world, she's through with us, we've got each other, we've got each other's arms. You gotta win a little, so you're gonna have to lose a little. You might have to sing the blues a little. That's the story of yes, that's the glory of. That's the story of yes, that's the glory of. Billy Hill. Thank you. So, we're really telescoping this a lot. I mean, we've just burned through the jazz age, the swing era, and we're going to dispense with the 40s entirely. Because the 40s, although being my favorite musical period of all time because of the jazz and the rhythm and blues and everything, it was notable in the arc of the Jewish contribution to popular American music, primarily for the fact that all these small record labels popped up around the country, run by Jewish entrepreneurs. The reason was that the major companies during the war had to cut back, and there was a shortage of shellac for 78s, so they stopped recording specialty artists, what they called also at the time race records, blues records, country records. All of these things went by the wayside. They recorded Bing Crosby and a few other things, and that was what they were going to record. So these entrepreneurs jumped into the breach and started all these labels, the labels that became classic, well, jazz labels like Blue Note and rhythm and blues labels like Ace Records or Savoy Records. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of these heroic outpost labels. It's like, you know, talking about the Hittites and the Mennonites. You know, it's like these tribes are out there and they're surviving and they're... I'll give you a great example of one of the great contributors. It's a man named Milt Gabler. Milt Gabler ran a little store in New York called Colony Records. And he started a little record label because there was this opportunity. And he pursued a singer named Billie Holiday. He really wanted to work with her. And Billie Holiday, of course, at the time was a star. And there was another gentleman named Abe Mirapol. He was a school teacher in New York City, both Jewish gentlemen. And Abe Mirapol had written a poem, really, which later he wrote music for. It was a song, and the song was called Strange Fruit. And he brought it to Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday was leery of recording it because it sang about lynching in the South, black bodies swinging from the trees. She took the song and performed it in public a few times, and it went over really well. And it became kind of a signature for her, and so she took it to Columbia Records, and they absolutely refused to record a song like this. So Milt Gabler said, well, I'm going to start a record label myself, and you can record it on my label. And he did, and it became a huge, huge hit. And for years, many people assumed that it was written by Billie Holiday. But to make this even sweeter, the reason Abe was motivated to give it to Billie Holiday because he was friends with W.E.B. Du Bois, the great black historian. And Du Bois also, in the early 50s, was friends with Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, who, as you probably know, were convicted and killed for being spies. And their two boys, their little boys, were adopted by a man named Abe Mirapol. So Abe Mirapol and Milt Gabler play quite a significant role in this evolution of the evolution of Jewish social justice and black freedom. The other thing that Milt Gabler did is he recorded the first rock and roll record. It was, well, now this is arguable because some people think that the first rock and roll record was a Hot Rod Lincoln. I don't believe that. I think the first rock and roll record was Rock Around the Clock. Because when it came out, kids just went nuts. And I think that's the sign of a rock and roll record. It drives young people crazy. There's a great story. I'm telling too many stories. I'm getting in the way of the music here, but there's a great story about Rock Around the Clock. They ran out of time, so they had time to record it twice, and they recorded it the first time, and the band sounded great, but Bill Haley, who was singing, sounded terrible. So they recorded it again, and Bill Haley sounded great, but the band sounded terrible. So the band left, and Milt Gabler did the thing that was so innovative. He got his engineer to combine the two takes to get the vocal off the one, put it on the track of the other. It became this huge hit. It's still a huge hit. And that was the first example of a song that wasn't captured in the studio. It was manufactured. And from that time forward, all the music that you hear is manufactured music. So now we're up to the 50s. That was the 30s and the 40s. Now the 50s, you might ask, where are the Jewish people? Because what you see mostly are hillbillies. Well, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, of course, but the hillbillies are out there, you know. Elvis Presley, let's talk about Elvis. Well, aside from the fact that I heard that Elvis Presley's grandmother was allegedly Jewish, and he did wear a tie toward the end of his life around his neck. But it's inconclusive. We're not claiming him yet. But who we are claiming are the two guys who wrote all his songs, Lieber and Stoller. They wrote all the songs for the Coasters. They wrote all of Elvis's hits. And there was a place called the Brill Building where all these great songs came out. You'll recognize this one. This is a Brill Building song. And again, think of it as a little narrative. What's so amazing about the Lieber and Stoller songs? Charlie Brown, what are the great Coasters hits? My mind is a blank. But anyway, they're these little narratives, right? They're these little stories. This is one, a classic narrative called On Broadway that they wrote. Say the neon lights are bright on Broadway. They say there's always magic in the air. But when you're walking down the street and you ain't had enough to eat, glitter rubs right off and you're nowhere. They say the women treat you nice on Broadway. But looking at them just gives me the blues. 'Cause how you gonna make some time when all you got is one thin dime, and one thin dime won't even shine your shoes? Say that I won't last too long on Broadway. I'll catch a Greyhound bus for home, they say. But they're dead wrong, I know they are, 'cause I can play this here guitar, and I won't quit till I'm a star on Broadway. On Broadway. On Broadway. On Broadway. Thank you. Moving right along, that was the 50s. How'd you like them? Page 27. Of course, the 60s, we all know what that's about. They say if you remember them, you weren't there. And it ushered in the great Bobby Zimmerman from Hibbing, Minnesota. An interesting character, a very Jewish character for many reasons. First of all, like all great Jewish composers, he immediately changed his name. You don't think Irving Berlin was born Irving Berlin, do you? Second of all, he was not afraid to change his life story. You know, he invented himself out of whole cloth. For example, he would tell people later on in life that he was born in New Mexico and worked in carnivals. He explained the generous size of his proboscis by saying he was an American Indian. And you have to ask yourself, why is being an American Indian, a Native American, more American than being a Jewish American? But of course, this was the 60s, and we were trying things out. And one of the things Bob Dylan did is he made it okay for people, young and inexperienced, to write their own songs. Before Bob Dylan came along, songs were written by professional songwriters. Bob Dylan once said, "I killed the professional songwriter," and he was right, because after Bob Dylan, everybody, good, bad, or indifferent, talented or not, wrote their own songs. And we can all think of many examples of both. Louie Louie, for example. A great song. So Bob Dylan is very important for a lot of reasons. The music of conscience. This idea of songs having this rich texture, this metaphorical aspect to them. This idea of a separation, finally, not between people of different cultures, but people of different generations, where generations became culture. Very deep shift in the American psyche, and Bob Dylan really precipitated a lot of it. And yet there are questions being raised because, as you may know, he was born again, he was not born again. It wasn't clear if he was a Chassid or perhaps an American Indian, a native. There's very little evidence, let's put it this way, in his music of a Jewish background. But that's very Jewish also when you think about this, because in the beginning, they asked Irving Berlin, Mr. Berlin, tell me, what does your being a Jew have to do with your success as a songwriter? And Irving Berlin said, nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm an American, I write American songs. Sent in as George Gershwin. Mr. Gershwin, what does your being Jewish have to do with the success as a songwriter? And he said, absolutely nothing. I'm an American composer. I write American songs. It came eventually to be the scene that by saying being a Jew has nothing to do with it is the most Jewish thing you could say. I'm right. You know I'm right. And this is Bob Dylan's position as well. But there is one moment in the Bob Dylan canon that we're going to play for you, where he steps right out and he quotes from the most troubling passage of the Torah, a passage called the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, from the High Holiday services, where God says to Abraham, take your son, your only son, the son that you love, take him up there and kill him to prove your faith. And it's a very troubling passage for many reasons, obviously. But the interesting thing is Bob Dylan uses it to set up a song about a highway that runs from Hibbing, Minnesota down to New Orleans. It's a mystical highway, divides the United States in half. It runs right through the Delta, it runs through Mississippi, it runs through the great Stowe Oak plantation, it runs through what was known as the Crossroads, where the great Robert Johnson allegedly traded his soul to the devil. And this highway has a lot of mystical elements to it in American heritage. And one of the things about the Crossroads and this highway is it's the point at which the deal goes down, right? And there's something about the Jewish tradition where in that same passage, the binding of Isaac, God calls out to Abraham, and Abraham says, Hineni, I'm here. I'm here. It happens 3 times. I'm here. And I think whether Dylan was doing this on purpose or he was doing it inadvertently, this is a song about I'm here. I'm a witness. I'm present. Not that I'm hearing your voice and I'm responding, but I'm in this body in this moment. And I think it's a very powerful song. It's called Highway 61.
Well, God said to Abraham, kill me a son. Abe said, man, you must be putting me on. God said, no. Abe said, what? God said, do what you want, Abe, but the next time I'm coming, you better run. Abe said, where you want this killing done? And God said, Highway 61. Now, Georgia Sam had a bloody nose, and now the welfare department, they give him no more clothes. And he asked for Howard, say, where can I go? Howard said, there's just one place that I know. Tell me quick, said Sam, 'cause I gotta run. Oh, Howard just pointed with his gun. He said, back down Highway 61. Finger said to Louis the King, yeah, Dan Puccio, I got 1,000 telephones, don't none of them ring. He said, do you know where I might be able to off these things? Louis the King said, hey, let me think for a minute, son. He said, yes, I think it can be easily done. Back down Highway 61. Now the 5th daughter on a 12th night told her first father that things weren't right. My complexion, she said, well, it's much too white. He said, come on, baby, step in the light. You're right, let me tell the second mother that this has been done. But the second mother was with the second son, and they were both having fun on Highway 61. Now the roving gambler, he was very bored. He was trying to start the next world war. He found a promoter, nearly fell on the floor. He said, man, I never engaged in this kind of thing before, but yeah, it can be easily done. We put up some bleachers out in the sun, and we have it all back down on Highway 61. Tom Williams on the bass. Dan Puccio on the saxophone. Well, it's happened. This is the last song. It doesn't go fast when you're telling stories and playing tunes. I just love it. I really do. This one, you all have your hymnals. You got your hymnals when you do that? This is number 22 in your hymnals. We've been talking about Jewish influence on popular music. And one of the big questions in doing this study for me was, who is a Jew? Because, you know, you really can't talk about the Jewish influence on popular music unless you can address the question, who is a Jew? And it's not so simple as we've all discovered over the years. I mean, the bottom line is, if anybody can convert, well then, of course, we all have the inner Jew within us. So, that won't do any good. And then there's the question of Jewish music. There are no Jewish notes on the piano. There's 88 keys, everybody plays the same keys. So this idea of Jewish music is very, very hard to pin down. But I know this next song is a Jewish song. And I know it because I wrote it. Life's a lesson, you can fail it, you can set your spirit free or jail it, but setting it free is no guarantee it's gonna fly when you set it. The object is to ride it, but setting it free while you're sitting astride it isn't easy, and you can learn a lot by going crazy, and you can fail it. You can set your spirit free or jail it. Setting it free is no guarantee it's gonna fly when you set it. And if you feel like you're in prison, no one's coming to talk or to listen. Take it easy. I know that no one ever has it easy, girl. Life's a lesson you can pass or fail. And if you feel like you're in prison, no one is coming to talk or to listen. Take it easy. Know that no one ever has it easy, boy. Take it easy. You never learn to fly by freezing, girl. Life's a lesson you can pass or fail.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You want to hear one more song? Yeah. Okay, we'll do one more song. And then we'll go out into the lobby, and if anybody wants me to write my name on the book, or anybody's, I'll write anybody's name on anything, okay? We'll do that. Let's close with another Bob Dylan song. Let's do Love Mine Zero. This is an interesting song. You know, Bob Dylan is deceptively sophisticated. He sounds like he's writing these very simple three-chord songs, but when you look into them, they have a lot of depth. This is a love song that he wrote that I completely changed around, if I can find it. Eyes. These aren't the words to this particular song, but let me listen to this. This is the Bob Dylan lyric. And listen how it's swinging. Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. A man in a trench coat badge, I'm laid off, says he got a bad crop, he got to get it paid off. But look out, kids. Nothing he did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down an alleyway looking for a new friend. A man in a coonskin cap, a big penny one, $11 bills. You only got 10. Here's one of his tunes that I changed up. My love speaks like silence, without ideals or violence. She doesn't say she's faithful, but she's true like ice, like fire. People carry roses, make promises by the hour. My love, she laughs like flowers. Valentines can't buy her love. In the dime stores and bus stations, people talk about situations, read books, repeat quotations, write conclusions on the wall. Some speak of the future. My love, she speaks softly. She knows there's no success like failure. Failure's no success at all. Cloak and dagger dangles Madams light the candles in ceremonies of a horseman. Even a pawn can hold a grudge. Statues made of matchsticks crumble into one another. My love, she winks, she doesn't bow. She knows too much to argue or to judge. Now the bridge at midnight trembles, and the country doctor rambles. Bankers' nieces seek perfection, expecting all the gifts that wise men bring. The wind howls like a hammer, while the night blows cold and rainy. My love, she's like a raven at my window with a broken